Every era of automotive history has produced bold experiments, the kind of prototypes that seemed more like fever dreams than practical machines. Engineers and designers often pushed the limits of imagination, crafting vehicles that promised to change the way we thought about driving forever. Some were radical in shape, others in performance, and a few were simply bizarre combinations of technologies that had no business existing together. Yet, these prototypes carried one common trait: they were just too crazy to survive. While some managed to spark ideas that shaped future cars, most ended up as museum pieces or forgotten chapters in motoring history. Their downfall came from impracticality, excessive costs, or concepts so far ahead of their time that the world wasn't ready. Today, we're taking a look at 12 wild prototypes that could have rewritten the rulebook, if only reality hadn't caught up with them first. Number 1. The Ford Nucleon. In the 1950s, the world was in the grip of nuclear optimism. Atomic power was marketed as the solution to everything: electricity, medicine, even household appliances. Ford, never one to shy away from bold design studies, decided to extend this enthusiasm into the automotive world with the Ford Nucleon concept. On paper, it sounded revolutionary: a car powered not by gasoline, but by a small nuclear reactor mounted at the rear. Drivers would simply swap out the reactor module at specialized stations once it had run its course. In theory, a single core could power the Nucleon for thousands of miles before replacement. The Nucleon's design matched its futuristic premise. It featured a space-age body, a cab-forward layout, and styling that looked more like something from a sci-fi comic than a dealership showroom. It captured the imagination of a public fascinated with technology and progress. But as dazzling as it looked, the concept faced insurmountable challenges. For starters, the miniaturization of nuclear reactors was far from feasible. Safely containing radiation in a car-sized unit was a fantasy, even for the most optimistic engineers. Then came the question of accidents. How could a vehicle crash be survivable if a nuclear reactor was on board? Even if the technology could be mastered, the infrastructure required for servicing and replacing nuclear cores was prohibitively expensive and impractical. Not to mention, public safety concerns would have made widespread adoption impossible. While the Ford Nucleon never made it past the scale model stage, it wasn't a wasted experiment. The concept highlighted just how ambitious automakers could be when dreaming of a future powered by science. It also served as a cautionary tale about running too far ahead of technological realities. Today, the Nucleon exists only in museum displays, a reminder of an era when anything, no matter how dangerous, seemed possible if you added the word atomic in front of it. Number 2. The Chrysler Turbine Car. Few experimental cars ever came as close to real-world use as the Chrysler Turbine Car of the early 1960s. Unlike most prototypes that stayed locked in showrooms or design studios, Chrysler actually built 55 running examples and handed them out to ordinary families across the United States for real-world testing. The idea was bold. Instead of a traditional piston engine, the car would be powered by a gas turbine, similar to what you'd find in a jet aircraft. The promise was enticing: smoother operation, fewer moving parts, and the ability to run on just about any combustible liquid, from kerosene to tequila. The turbine car looked every bit the part of a futuristic machine. With its copper-colored body, sleek lines, and distinctive turbine whine, it turned heads wherever it went. The driving experience was unlike anything Americans had ever seen before. There was virtually no vibration, throttle response was eerily smooth, and drivers marveled at the engine's ability to burn almost anything. For a moment, it seemed Chrysler might just be on the verge of revolutionizing transportation. But reality quickly set in. Gas turbines, while great for airplanes, presented serious problems for cars. Fuel economy was abysmal compared to piston engines, with miles per gallon sinking deep into the single digits. The engines also ran extremely hot, producing exhaust temperatures that could scorch anything or anyone behind the car. Noise was another issue. The shrill turbine whine, while futuristic, became annoying for daily driving. And despite the promise of fewer moving parts, manufacturing costs were astronomical. Government regulations at the time also presented roadblocks. Meeting emissions standards was nearly impossible with turbine exhaust, and Chrysler couldn't justify building a mass production line for a car that required so much specialized engineering. By the late 1960s, the dream had fizzled. Most of the cars were recalled and destroyed, leaving only a handful in museums and private collections. The Chrysler turbine car remains one of the most legendary failed experiments in automotive history. It showed just how close a radical idea could come to mainstream acceptance, only to be undone by practicality. Today, enthusiasts still dream of what might have been, but the turbine car stands as proof that not every aerospace idea can thrive on the road. Number 3. The Amphicar 770. In the early 1960s, a German company set out to create the ultimate go-anywhere vehicle. The result was the Amphicar 770, a quirky mashup of car and boat. On land, it looked like a small convertible, lightweight, compact, and cheerful. But at the press of a lever, the wheels disengaged, twin propellers engaged, and suddenly the Amphicar became a boat capable of cruising across rivers, lakes, and even calm coastal waters. It was marketed as the car that could take you from your garage to the sea without ever stopping. The idea captured imaginations instantly. Who wouldn't want a vehicle that could skip traffic jams by cutting across waterways? Advertisements promised carefree adventures, families driving straight down the boat ramp and into the water, smiling as if they were living in the future. The Amphicar seemed to offer freedom beyond the reach of ordinary cars, but the reality of ownership was less magical. As a car, the Amphicar was underpowered, with a tiny four-cylinder engine that struggled to reach highway speeds. Handling was wobbly, braking distances were long, and safety standards were minimal compared to other vehicles of the era. As a boat, it was equally compromised. The Amphicar wasn't fast in the water, topping out at about 7 knots, and even light waves could make the ride unnervingly unstable. Leaks were a constant problem, requiring vigilant maintenance to keep the car from literally sinking. Then there was the cost. At nearly $3,000 in the 1960s, the Amphicar was more expensive than many reliable sedans of the day. Yet it performed worse both on land and on water. Fewer than 4,000 units were ever built, with most buyers treating them as novelties rather than serious daily drivers. Still, the Amphicar found a cult following, and even today, surviving examples show up at classic car events, delighting crowds with their amphibious antics. Yet it was never destined for mass success. The compromises in both land and water performance made it impractical, and regulations around safety and emissions eventually pushed it out of production. the Amphicar stands as one of the strangest production-ready prototypes ever built. A vehicle that promised the world but struggled to deliver in either environment. Its legacy is more about its charm than its practicality, proving that sometimes being too crazy to survive also makes you unforgettable. Number 4. The GM Firebird series. In the mid-1950s, General Motors stunned the public with a series of experimental cars that looked like they had taxied in straight from a runway. Known as the Firebird concepts, these machines weren't about styling tweaks or small mechanical experiments. They were fully fledged jet-powered vehicles designed to showcase what GM imagined the future of driving could look like. With bubble canopies, needle-like tails, and fins resembling fighter aircraft, the Firebird 1, 2, and 3 were unlike anything else on the road. The first Firebird, unveiled in 1954, was essentially a jet plane on wheels. It featured a gas turbine engine producing 370 horsepower, capable of screaming to outrageous speeds if unleashed. Later iterations experimented with advanced ideas like electronic guidance systems, automated controls, and titanium body panels. To the public, the Firebird cars were dazzling. They embodied post-war optimism and America's obsession with aerospace design, promising a tomorrow where cars would fly down highways at jet-like speeds. But the problems with turning these wild prototypes into reality were obvious. Gas turbines, as Chrysler would later also discover, were inefficient for everyday driving. They guzzled fuel, generated intense heat, and were nearly impossible to quiet down to acceptable levels. More importantly, the radical shapes of the Firebirds weren't designed with real-world safety or practicality in mind. Bubble canopies overheated under the sun, exhaust flames scorched the pavement behind the cars, and handling at road speeds was unpredictable at best. GM never intended the Firebirds for production, but rather as a technological showcase to dazzle crowds at the company's Motorama shows. In that respect, they were wildly successful. Crowds marveled at the sight of turbine-powered fighter jets on wheels, and the Firebirds cemented GM's reputation as a company willing to dream big. Still, as automotive technology matured, the Firebird prototypes became symbols of how far imagination could stray from practicality. No matter how futuristic they looked, the idea of a jet-powered commuter car was simply too impractical to survive outside of concept halls. Today, the Firebird cars sit in museums as shining examples of mid-century optimism, glorious reminders of a time when automakers thought the road ahead might look like an airport runway. Number 5. The Peugeot Movie. Unveiled at the 2005 Geneva Motor Show, the Peugeot Movie looked less like a car and more like something lifted straight from an animated film. With its oversized circular wheels, bubble-like glass cabin, and whimsical styling, the movie was a city car designed for a future where roads would be crowded and space limited. It was meant to symbolize freedom of movement, hence the name Movie. And it embodied Peugeot's vision of an eco-friendly, ultra-compact urban commuter. The movie's design immediately sparked curiosity. Its massive, wheel-encompassing discs looked like they belonged on a futuristic robot rather than a car. The transparent doors opened in a sliding arc, giving it a theatrical, almost cartoonish presence. Inside, the cabin offered seating for two in a minimalist, airy environment that prioritized visibility and maneuverability. Peugeot intended it to run on an electric motor, showing their early commitment to sustainable mobility long before EVs hit mainstream acceptance. But while the movie charmed auto show crowds, its chances of ever reaching production were virtually non-existent. The radical wheel design created massive engineering headaches, turning radius, stability, and suspension integration were all impractical. Its tiny footprint made it unsuitable for real-world safety regulations, and while electric power seemed futuristic in 2005, battery technology at the time wasn't advanced enough to make the movie viable as more than a design exercise. The concept also lacked versatility. With seating for only two and minimal cargo space, it was little more than a novelty for urban dreamers, not a practical solution for everyday drivers. And while futuristic concepts often inspire elements in later models, the movie was simply too extreme. Even Peugeot admitted that its purpose was more about sparking imagination than seriously previewing a production car. Yet, in hindsight, the movie wasn't a complete dead end. It hinted at the growing importance of sustainability, compact design, and fun styling in future city cars. Some of its DNA can arguably be seen in the quirky, eco-focused vehicles that followed, like the Smart 42 or Renault Twizy. The Peugeot movie remains a perfect example of why some prototypes are too crazy to survive. It was less a car and more a design experiment, delightful to look at but impossible to mass-produce. Today, it's remembered as one of the more whimsical creations in concept car history, a cartoon turned into metal, just long enough to make us smile. Number 6. The BMW Gina Light Visionary Model. In 2008, BMW shocked the automotive world by unveiling the Gina Light Visionary model, a concept so radical it didn't just challenge engineering conventions, it reimagined what a car's skin could be. Instead of traditional steel or carbon fiber panels, the Gina was draped in a flexible fabric stretched tightly over a movable metal frame. The result was a car that looked alive, capable of literally changing its shape with the press of a button. Headlights blinked open through slits in the fabric, body panels shifted to alter aerodynamics, and even the hood peeled back like a pair of eyelids to reveal the engine beneath. The idea behind Gina was bold. Cars should adapt to their drivers' needs, rather than remain static. Its name, geometry, and functions in N adaptations reflected this philosophy. By using a lightweight, waterproof, and heat-resistant polyurethane-coated spandex, BMW created a body that could morph seamlessly while remaining durable enough for demonstration. Crowds were mesmerized. The Gina looked like something from a science fiction movie, its smooth, muscle-like surfaces rippling as if the car itself were alive. Designers hailed it as the next evolution of automotive aesthetics, a radical departure from rigid sheet metal forms that had defined cars for over a century. But, as imaginative as it was, the Gina was never destined for production. Safety regulations require crumple zones, airbags, and rigid structures to protect occupants. Features a fabric skin could never provide. Durability was another concern. While the spandex covering was weather-resistant, it would have been vulnerable to punctures, wear, and UV damage over time. Repairing such a car would have been a nightmare, and consumer confidence in a fabric-bodied vehicle was always going to be limited. Still, the Gina wasn't just a crazy dead end. It served as a creative playground for BMW designers who carried lessons from it into later production cars. The focus on lightweight construction, driver-focused adaptability, and bold sculptural forms influenced models like the BMW i8 and even trickled into design philosophies for their future EV lineup. The BMW Gina remains one of the most radical concept cars ever built, beautiful, haunting, and surreal. It was a vision too strange to mass-produce, but it proved that sometimes the craziest ideas are the ones that push the boundaries of what's possible, inspiring the industry in ways more practical cars never could. Number 7. The Renault Raccoon. In the 1990s, Renault became known for its eccentric design experiments, but few were as outlandish as the Renault Raccoon. Unveiled in 1993, this bizarre-looking prototype blurred the line between sports car, off-road SUV, and amphibious vehicle. The Raccoon looked like something a comic book superhero would drive. Wide stance, massive wheels tucked under bulging arches, and a futuristic cockpit lifted high above the road. Its most jaw-dropping party trick? The ability to float and drive through water. The Raccoon was powered by a 3.0-liter twin-turbocharged V6, producing around 300 horsepower, which was channeled through an advanced four-wheel drive system. Its suspension could raise and lower on command, giving it both sports car handling and SUV-like clearance. Renault engineers even designed it with sealed body panels and a watertight cabin, so that when it entered water, it transformed into a boat-like machine propelled by hidden jets. On paper, it was the ultimate go-anywhere vehicle, a crossover decades before crossovers became mainstream. The interior was equally futuristic. Access was through gullwing-style doors, and once inside, drivers were greeted by a high-tech digital dashboard and fighter jet-inspired seating. Renault claimed the Raccoon could be the perfect vehicle for urban adventurers, equally at home zipping through cities, climbing over rugged terrain, or crossing rivers. But like so many prototypes, the Raccoon's ambition was also its downfall. The cost of developing an amphibious sports car with complex suspension and aerospace-inspired doors was astronomical. Its design, while futuristic, was too extreme for mass appeal. Safety and emissions regulations presented further obstacles, and the practical market for such a hybrid vehicle was virtually non-existent. Who, after all, truly needed a sports car that could also swim? The Raccoon ended up as more of a publicity stunt than a realistic production candidate, but it captured imaginations and hinted at Renault's willingness to dream outside the box. Today, it's remembered as one of the most eccentric concept cars of the 1990s, equal parts brilliant and bonkers. In many ways, the Renault Raccoon embodied exactly why prototypes exist: to push boundaries, to explore the improbable, and sometimes to remind us that the craziest ideas often make the best stories, even if they're far too wild to survive in the real world. Number 8. The Italdesign Capsula. In the early 1980s, famed designer Giorgetto Giugiaro and his Italdesign studio unveiled one of the strangest prototypes ever built, the Capsula. Unlike most concept cars, which focused on futuristic styling or high performance, the Capsula was built around a radical modular idea. The vehicle's mechanical base, a flatbed skateboard chassis with an engine and wheels, could accept different capsules or body shells mounted on top. One day, your Capsula could be a minivan. The next, it could be an ambulance, delivery van, or even a camper, all by swapping the top module. The design was ahead of its time. Giugiaro envisioned a future where one chassis could serve a household or a business for decades, while the bodies could be upgraded or exchanged as needed. It was a vision of efficiency and sustainability long before those ideas became buzzwords in the automotive industry. The prototype itself looked quirky but practical. The minivan-style capsule featured sliding doors, a spacious interior, and large windows for visibility. With a Fiat-sourced diesel engine, it was built on a platform that could realistically be produced. To audiences in 1982, the Capsula seemed like a bold reinvention of how people thought about owning vehicles, but reality quickly undercut the vision. Manufacturing a universal chassis that could safely accommodate multiple body types was an engineering nightmare. Each capsule would require strict crash testing, drastically raising costs. Consumers also weren't ready to buy into the idea of owning one car with multiple skins. Instead, most people preferred to simply buy a separate car for each need. Logistics were another problem. Swapping body shells wasn't something you could do at home. You'd need specialized facilities, adding inconvenience to an already complex system. Despite its practicality problems, the Capsula was eerily prophetic. Its skateboard platform idea would resurface decades later with electric vehicles. Companies like Tesla, Rivian, and Canoo now use similar modular bases that can underpin multiple body styles. In many ways, Giugiaro's crazy prototype wasn't wrong. It was simply decades too early. The Ital-designed Capsula never left the prototype stage, but it remains a fascinating glimpse into what could have been. It was too ambitious and impractical to survive in its own time, yet its influence lives on in today's EV revolution. Sometimes, crazy ideas just need the world to catch up. Number 9. The Mercedes-Benz F015 Luxury in Motion. In 2015, Mercedes-Benz unveiled what looked more like a spaceship lounge than a car. The F015 Luxury in Motion concept was designed as a fully autonomous vehicle, showcasing the brand's vision for a driverless future. With its sleek pod-like shape, silver finish, and illuminated grille, the F015 looked nothing like a traditional sedan. Instead, it was a rolling living room on wheels. Inside, the concept pushed boundaries even further. 4 futuristic lounge chairs were mounted on swiveling bases, allowing passengers to face each other during a trip. Massive touchscreens lined the doors, offering entertainment, internet access, and productivity tools. Ambient lighting gave the cabin a sci-fi glow, while the autonomous system promised to whisk passengers to their destinations without anyone touching the wheel. To Mercedes, the F015 wasn't just a car, it was a mobile living space. The technology on display was dazzling. The car used a mix of sensors, LiDAR, and cameras to navigate, while projecting signals to pedestrians using lights and displays to show its intentions. It was one of the first vehicles to openly explore how autonomous cars could interact with humans outside the cabin. To reinforce its futuristic credentials, the F015 was powered by a hydrogen fuel cell and electric hybrid drivetrain, highlighting sustainable luxury. But as jaw-dropping as it looked, the F015 was far too radical for reality. Full autonomy was, and still is, an unsolved challenge. Legal frameworks, safety standards, and infrastructure simply weren't ready to accommodate a driverless car that expected no human input. Its lounge-style seating arrangement ignored crash safety regulations, and the cost of producing such advanced technology would have been astronomical. On top of that, hydrogen fuel cell adoption has remained slow, making the F015 doubly unrealistic. Ultimately, the F015 served as more of a thought experiment than a production candidate. Mercedes used it to showcase ideas about the role of cars in society, shifting from driving machines to personal sanctuaries. While some of its ideas, like large infotainment screens and advanced driver assistance systems, have trickled into modern vehicles, the car as a whole was simply too futuristic to survive. The F-015 Luxury in Motion remains an icon of automotive imagination. It was bold, beautiful, and wildly impractical. Proof that sometimes automakers need to dream far ahead, even if those dreams remain on the auto show stage. Number 10. The Cadillac Cyclone. Back in 1959, Cadillac unveiled one of the most futuristic concept cars of its era, the Cadillac Cyclone. Designed under the legendary Harley Earl, this jet-inspired prototype looked like it belonged on a runway rather than a highway. With its bubble canopy, dramatic tail fins, and bullet-shaped nose cones, the Cyclone embodied the atomic age's obsession with aerospace design. But it wasn't just about looks. The Cyclone also packed in some of the wildest technology ever imagined for a car of its time. One of its headline features was a radar-based collision avoidance system. Yes, decades before modern adaptive cruise control and automatic braking, Cadillac dreamed up a car that could detect obstacles using radar housed inside the twin nose cones. The system was supposed to warn the driver of potential dangers ahead, a remarkable preview of the driver assist technologies we take for granted today. The Cyclone also experimented with other innovations. Its sliding bubble canopy opened electrically, gliding back to allow entry. The interior was sealed with advanced air filtration to keep out smog, dust, and even radiation, a reflection of Cold War anxieties. The car's body panels were crafted from lightweight fiberglass, another forward-looking move that hinted at the materials revolution yet to come. But while the Cyclone dazzled at auto shows, it was far too impractical for production. The radar system was bulky, unreliable, and prohibitively expensive for consumer use. The bubble canopy, while futuristic, created unbearable heat inside the cabin on sunny days, essentially turning it into a greenhouse. Visibility was limited, maintenance would have been a nightmare, and the car's extreme styling would have alienated most mainstream buyers. In the end, the Cadillac Cyclone remained a one-off dream machine, parked today in GM's Heritage Collection. Still, it left a lasting influence. Many of the ideas tested in the Cyclone, from advanced driver assistance technology to lightweight construction, eventually found their way into mainstream vehicles, albeit in much more practical forms. The Cadillac Cyclone is a perfect example of a prototype that was too crazy to survive in its own time, yet brilliant in its vision. It looked wild, promised the future, and ultimately proved that even the most far-out experiments can help shape tomorrow's reality. Number 11. The Toyota FV2. Unveiled at the 2013 Tokyo Motor Show, the Toyota FV2 looked less like a car and more like something pulled straight out of a video game. This wild prototype was designed to rethink not only how cars look, but how humans interact with them. Gone were the steering wheel, pedals, and traditional dashboard. Instead, the FV2 was controlled entirely by the driver's body movements. Lean forward to accelerate, lean back to slow down, and tilt side to side to steer. It was essentially a giant automotive Segway with 4 wheels. The FV2 also aimed to revolutionize the emotional connection between human and machine. Toyota envisioned it as a vehicle that could learn from its driver over time, adjusting performance and behavior to suit their preferences. A built-in augmented reality display projected information onto the windshield, while voice and facial recognition systems were designed to gauge the driver's mood and adapt accordingly. Toyota called it the car that connects with you on an emotional level. Visually, the FV2 was striking. Its futuristic, pod-like body, glowing surfaces, and motorcycle-inspired stance made it look like it belonged in a science fiction movie. Toyota marketed it as a vision of future urban mobility, personal, adaptive, and deeply interactive. But, as imaginative as it was, the FV2 was far too impractical for the real world. The idea of controlling a car by leaning was a recipe for disaster outside a controlled environment. Safety regulations alone made such a design impossible, and the learning vehicle concept, while charming, raised countless concerns about reliability, privacy, and complexity. The FV2 was less a car than a design philosophy on wheels. Toyota never intended it for mass production, but rather as a showcase of future-thinking ideas. Some elements, like augmented reality displays and vehicle-to-driver connectivity, have since begun creeping into real cars. Yet the FV2 itself was simply too bizarre to survive, an experiment in reimagining mobility that worked better as an art piece than as a drivable product. Today, the Toyota FV2 is remembered as one of the strangest prototypes ever to hit the stage. It was bold, emotional, and downright crazy. Exactly the kind of concept that pushes boundaries, even if it never had a chance of rolling into showrooms. Number 12. The GM XP512E Lunar Rover Prototype. In the late 1960s, as the world was gripped by space race fever, General Motors decided to think far beyond highways and city streets. Partnering with NASA, GM developed several prototype vehicles designed not for Earth, but for the surface of the Moon. One of the most radical of these was the GMXP512E, a lunar rover prototype that looked like a cross between a dune buggy and a spacecraft. With oversized mesh wheels, lightweight tubular framing, and seating for astronauts in bulky suits, it was built for one environment only: the barren, low-gravity lunar surface. The XP512E was battery-powered, capable of crawling across the Moon's rocky terrain at modest speeds while carrying tools and equipment for astronauts. Its wheels were a marvel of design, constructed from woven steel mesh to withstand jagged lunar rocks while staying lightweight enough for transport on Apollo spacecraft. GM engineers tested the rover extensively on simulated lunar terrain here on Earth, pushing the boundaries of what a vehicle could mean. To the public, it was thrilling. At a time when space exploration symbolized human progress, the idea of a drivable car on the Moon captured imaginations worldwide. The XP512E showed that GM wasn't just about Cadillacs and Chevys. It was a company dreaming about mobility on other worlds. But for all its brilliance, the XP512E was never destined for mass production. It wasn't practical for earthly use, nor was there any long-term market for vehicles designed solely for space exploration. Only a handful of lunar rovers were ever needed, and NASA ultimately refined the design into the smaller, more specialized lunar roving vehicle used on Apollo 15, 16, and 17. The XP512E remained an experimental prototype, a stepping stone in the evolution of extraterrestrial transportation. Still, its legacy is enormous. The concept of off-world vehicles lives on in today's Mars rovers, and engineers continue to draw inspiration from GM's pioneering work in lightweight mobility. The XP512E may have been too crazy to survive as a consumer product, but as a vision of where cars could one day go, it was unmatched. The GM XP512E reminds us that the wildest prototypes aren't just about futuristic styling or outlandish engineering. They're about expanding imagination itself. Sometimes, the craziest cars aren't meant for roads at all. From nuclear-powered dreams to fabric-skinned visions and even lunar rovers, these 12 prototypes prove that innovation often lives on the edge of madness. They were too costly, too impractical, or simply too far ahead of their time to ever see real production. Yet each one left behind a legacy, sparking ideas that influenced safer, smarter, and more efficient cars for the future. While they never survived in showrooms, they remind us that progress depends on daring to dream. After all, the wildest experiments often inspire the breakthroughs that shape the roads we drive today.